Canada only works as a state. It doesn't. We don't need anything they have. As a state, it would be one of the great states anyway. This would be the most incredible country.
Donald Trump continues his rhetoric when it comes to Canada. The U.S. president also saying he will not bend on tariffs. This is Doug Ford, Dominic LeBlanc, and François-Philippe Champagne meet with senior U.S. officials for a high-stakes meeting in Washington this hour. We're awaiting a live update.
And these pictures of Premier Ford ahead of today's meetings. Were today's talks constructive? We're waiting to find out.
Plus, we are back at the scene of a deadly fire in Oshawa tonight that's rocked a local community. What we're hearing from investigators today, that's coming up.
This is Live at 5. I'm Bakari Savage.
And I'm Lena Latafat. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Live at 5. We are watching developments in Washington tonight. That is where a high-profile meeting is taking place between federal and provincial officials and U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick.
CP24's Arda Zakarian joins us live from Queen's Park with the very latest. Arda, this meeting's about toning down the temperature, huh?
Absolutely. That is really the point of it, is to have cooler heads roll. That's what Premier Ford said the other day when he said Howard Lutnick reached out to him, extended this olive branch. So let's talk about who is at this meeting. We have Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, Premier Doug Ford. He has federal finance ministers with him, Minister of Finance Dominic LeBlanc, Minister of Industry Philippe François Champagne, the Canadian ambassador to the United States. They are all in this meeting. It is a high-stakes meeting. They are going to be discussing these tariffs, also starting a conversation on the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade deal. Of course, Premier Ford can't make any decisions on that, but he does have federal ministers there with him. So this has been a very interesting time, and we know that Premier Doug Ford did an interview with Fox News just a couple of hours ago, and he said back in 2016, he supported Trump.
I've been with President Trump, as you can see, from before he got elected, before 2016. And many millions of Canadians were. Now he wants to attack our families, take food off our table, shut down our manufacturing facility. And as the Premier of Ontario, I'm supposed to roll over? I can tell you, I'll never roll over.
So we went from a phone call from Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick talking to Premier Ford, inviting him down to Washington, D.C. just a couple of days ago. But today there is a different tone. He had a chance to speak with Fox News again ahead of this meeting. And he said, why are we doing business with Canada if they're not grateful, if they're not thankful?
Canada exists leaning on our economy. I mean, let's face it, cars used to be made in America. Why did Michigan's cars move to Canada to break out of the UAW? I mean, that's just unfair to American workers and American union workers. It's just, you finally have Donald Trump's got their back and is wondering why are cars made in Canada? Why are we doing all this business in Canada if they're not respectful, if they're not thankful?
So Trump even called Premier Ford some guy in Ontario after saying the other day that he's a strong man. So a different choice of words today than we have heard lately. We know in that room there are lots of big people, a lot of egos as well. So Premier Ford really has to remain calm and, as he said, cool and collected as he works on the negotiations and focuses on the task at hand. Back to you.
Carrie, and live at Queen's Park, a different tone from Howard Lutnick tonight ahead of that meeting. Arda, thank you for this. And of course, we're waiting for Canadian officials to update the media on how these talks went. Now, earlier today, U.S. President Donald Trump said he is, quote, not going to bend at all when it comes to tariffs on Canadian aluminum, steel, and the auto sector.
We've been ripped off as a country for many, many years. We've been subjected to costs that we shouldn't be subjected to. In the case of Canada, we're spending $200 billion a year to subsidize Canada. I love Canada. I love the people of Canada. I have many friends in Canada. The great one, Wayne Gretzky, the great. Hey, how good is Wayne Gretzky? He's the great one. But we have, I know many people from Canada that are good friends of mine. But, you know, the United States can't subsidize a country for $200 billion a year.
A new poll suggests that 40% of Canadians are worried about losing their jobs as a result of the trade war with the U.S.
The Leger poll says that Ontarians are the most concerned, with over half saying they're scared of losing their jobs. On the flip side, about 1 in 4 people in Atlantic Canada and Quebec say they're worried. 2 in 5 people in British Columbia, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan are worried, and 1 in 3 people in Alberta have concerns.
And other news, one person's dead after a crash northeast of Uxbridge.
Chopper 24 was over that scene on Lake Ridge Road at Scugog, line 14. The footage suggests a dark sedan and white SUV collided head-on, with both vehicles off in the ditch with significant front-end damage. Durham police say a female victim died in that crash, and the roads are expected to be closed for a number of hours.
Well, the man and 3 boys are facing a combined 69 charges in a string of armed robberies across Toronto.
Police sharing video of a takedown near Bathurst and Wilson yesterday. Watch this. Police say 4 people inside the vehicle were taken into custody, and a loaded handgun and hammer were recovered. The suspects, a 30-year-old man and 3 teenage boys from Brampton, allegedly committed 3 armed robberies at electronics stores since March 1st in Etobicoke, North York, and Scarborough.
A man and woman from Mississauga are facing drug charges, and after Peel police executed a search warrant at a home. It happened near Goreway Drive and Brandon Gate Drive.
Police released images of a large amount of cash and drugs seized from the home last month. It includes more than 1 kilogram of crystal meth, nearly 200 grams of heroin, and more than $46,000. Police say a child in the home was taken to a safe place, and a 27-year-old woman and 25-year-old man have been arrested.
Halton police said that they've dismantled a group responsible for dozens of auto thefts since September.
8 arrests have been made as a result of Project Mulligan. This investigation began in the fall following an increase in high-end car thefts from hotel parking lots in Oakville and Burlington. Police say at least 75 vehicles were stolen and 18 have been recovered, including 2 that were found in shipping containers in the Port of Montreal.
It's 5:07, 7 degrees. This is Live at 5. Okay, let's go to Oshawa. This is where officials, they're still working to determine the cause of a fatal house fire.
A mother and her 9-year-old daughter did not survive, and heavy equipment is now on the scene. CP24 Steve Ryan joins us live with more, and that community is heartbroken, Steve.
Yeah, Lena, the best adjective I can think of to describe the mood in this Oshawa community today is somber. Families have been coming by throughout the day to pay their respects. In fact, the family just left standing behind me here where they put down some flowers, and were very shaken up as to what they saw when they looked at this house that has been, I'll get out of the way so you can see this house, has been completely gutted as a result of fire. Now, we have heard from Durham police that the dad and the 12-year-old are still in a very serious condition in hospital. You can see that heavy equipment has been brought in. That's been done at the request of the Ontario Fire Marshal's office. They're concerned about the structural integrity of that house, and they're going to take it apart piece by piece starting tomorrow so that the OFM can conduct their investigation. We did get reaction earlier on from this location here on McGregor Street, and here's what we were told. Let's listen.
Like 8 o'clock in the morning, like we were just sitting inside our house, so my friend just called out there was fire in the house, and he was yelling for help and all. He was just completely burned. I think his hand was just completely burnt at the moment, and he was yelling for help, and we just ran quickly outside, and we called 911 within just 5 minutes and all. They reached over here, but at that time, the first floor, the ground floor was on fire and all. And he said the children and the wife was trapped on the second floor or something. And within 5 or 6 minutes, the police came and started doing what they could do and all. And like 10 or 12, 15 minutes and all, the fire people came and just took the children out.
The Ontario Fire Marshal's office are mandated to investigate all fires where a death occurs, and the Ontario Fire Marshal investigators will determine the cause, origin, and circumstance surrounding this place. I'll send it back to the desk.
All right, Steve, thank you for this. Well, a new warning today about a sharp uptick in measles cases in Ontario. Cases have more than doubled in the past 2 weeks, according to Public Health Ontario.
Okay, let's go live to the newsroom where CP24's Lindsay Biscaya has the latest. Lindsay.
And I think what's so fascinating about this, Lena and Bakari, is that this was a disease that's been largely eradicated in Canada since 1998, largely eradicated from North America since the early 2000s. So we're seeing a comeback of measles, and Public Health Ontario is reporting a jump compared to when the outbreak in Ontario was first announced back in October. So Public Health Ontario now saying they're seeing 372 total cases of measles in Ontario. That's 195 cases since the agency's last update, which was at the end of February 27th. And also, the agency said that out of 31 hospitalizations, 30 of those were unvaccinated, and one person's immunization status was not known. So that's quite telling as well. For more on this, I want to bring in Dr. Fahad Razak, internist at St. Michael's Hospital. Doctor, it's good to have you. Thanks for taking the time.
Good to be with you.
With that last stat I mentioned about immunizations and those who have been hospitalized, I mean, what does that tell you right now about what we're seeing in terms of this outbreak?
Yeah, look, we've had more cases in the last 2 weeks than the entire decade of 2013 to 2024. So clearly we're in the midst of a very significant outbreak. And the facts are very clear about this. This is a disease, as you said, that was essentially eradicated in Canada since 1998, simply because of a very easy medical therapy vaccination. Once the population is vaccinated, once kids are vaccinated, this is a disease that could be completely eradicated for Canada. And the outbreak is almost completely being driven by continuous spread of the disease among those who are unvaccinated. And then when there's enough cases, some who are immune suppressed because of other underlying illness or other conditions also become susceptible.
And I understand, as we've spoken about before, vaccinations that were not had, and this immunization issue is due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But for many other people, I mean, how frustrated does that make you feel as a health specialist to see that this could be basically this could be avoided if people were just immunized?
Look, deeply saddened. Remember, the vast majority of people impacted by this outbreak right now are kids, right? And kids are very, very susceptible to this illness. And of course, whether a child is vaccinated or not has to do with parental decisions. It's not even really under their own decision making. So you're having a disease completely preventable, essentially through vaccination, spread rapidly among kids who have very little say about whether they are protected or not. So to me, as a physician who sees patients, sees how much of illness is not preventable, when you have a scenario like this, of disease spreading at this rate, it's very, very sad.
And just lastly, is there a world in which we can maybe eradicate measles again quickly in Ontario, in Canada? Or do you think that now that we're seeing all of these cases popping up again, really throughout the country, but also in Ontario, do you think it's here for the long run once again?
No, this is definitely something that we can eradicate. It is simply the act of vaccination that can eradicate this illness. And I would say it is, of course, a very difficult time. I am very sympathetic to parents who are worried about vaccination because of misinformation. We have, for example, in the United States, the head of the largest health agency, most powerful agency in the world, is someone who promotes misinformation. So I can understand why it's difficult for parents, but I think physicians like myself, all of us who are in the system, we just want to keep pushing ahead with the message that it is incredibly clear how protective this vaccine is. Please get your child vaccinated if they're not vaccinated.
Okay, Dr. Fahad Razak at St. Michael's Hospital. Really appreciate your time and your insight as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay.
So there you go, Lena and Bakari. I mean, health officials in Ontario are saying they expect the cases to go up at least a little bit more. As you heard from Dr. Fahad Razak, there's still hope that we could have this eradicated once again in Ontario. Also important to mention as well, just before I send things back to you, those who are at most risk of measles are small children, pregnant women, and people with weakened immune systems. So definitely being careful to watch out for any symptoms. And of course, if you're not vaccinated against measles, get vaccinated. Back to you.
Yeah, and just call your doctor if you have any questions or concerns, if you're worried about measles. Lindsay Biscaya, live in our newsroom tonight. Thank you, Lindsay. Well, today is World Kidney Day, aimed at raising awareness about kidney disease.
Chronic kidney disease affects roughly 850 million people worldwide. By 2040, it's projected to be the 5th leading cause of years of life lost. Major risk factors for kidney disease include diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and obesity. More than 73% of Canadians waiting for an organ donor are waiting for a kidney.
And Navi Sohi was born with only one kidney and is one of those waiting for a donor. She joined us live this morning to talk about her journey.
Because of my journey with my health, I've dealt with this my entire life. it was a little bit difficult for me to have that conversation with people, letting them know, like, hey, I need some help. I'm looking for a kidney donor. So the way that I approached this that best suited my needs is I started an online campaign through Facebook and Instagram where I'm telling people about my health. I'm telling them progress as I go through my appointments, as I did my surgery for my PD catheter, and through these online platforms. I'm giving people also the opportunity to become a kidney donor for me.
Dr. Edward Cole is a kidney transplant pioneer and a previous physician-in-chief at University Health Network.
Being a living kidney donor is a very selfless gesture. There's an emotional benefit. There's no physical benefit. The risks are really very small, but they're not zero. I think the attitude of our program is we welcome people that are interested in being living donors, but we want to make sure that nobody is feeling pushed against their will to be a living donor. We don't want people to feel like they're on a train that they can't get off of. So we have a separate team that looks after recipients and a separate team that looks after living donors.
And doctors are calling for early detection policies for high-risk individuals to improve outcomes and reduce healthcare costs associated with kidney disease.
It's 5:18, 6 degrees. This is Live at 5.
City officials are looking to tackle sluggish condo development here in Toronto. More on what a new report is proposing. That is next. Stay with us. Welcome back. Canadian and U.S. markets continued their sell-off amid the trade war concerns.
The TSX dropped 220 points, or nearly 1%. The losses were steeper in New York, with the Dow down 1.3%, the S&P 500 falling 1.4%, and the tech-heavy NASDAQ dropping nearly 2%. The S&P 500 is now more than 10% below its record high from just last month and is now in correction territory.
And amid this climate of economic uncertainty, city staff, they're suggesting that Toronto City Council defer development charges on thousands of condo units in order to spur housing development.
Okay, for more on this, we're joined live by CP24 Sija Liu. Sija, good evening.
Good evening, Lena and Bakari. This report says the average cost of a development charge for a condo unit in the city is around $60,000. That factor, along with things like higher interest rates and declining home sales, is turning to a slowdown in housing supply. So that's why the city wants to defer development charges to help get shovels in the ground for about 3,000 condo units across the city. Now, to qualify, these projects would have to include 5 to 10% affordable housing units. And for more reaction and analysis on this, I'm joined live by David Wilkes, who is the president and CEO of the Building Industry and Land Development Association. David, thanks so much for your time today. We'd love to get your thoughts on this new report that is suggesting to defer these developmental charges. Do you think this is a solution to the slowdown in housing supply problem the city is facing?
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Certainly, it's a step in the right direction, and we welcome the recommendations from the City of Toronto staff to defer the development charges that you mentioned. To be clear, these development charges will still be paid, but they'll just be paid at a later stage rather than when the permit is pulled, as we called it in the industry. It will be when the condo is registered. So it's not an exemption from those fees. It's just a deferral, which will result in less interest being paid on the cost that developers often borrow money to finance those development charges. So certainly a step in the right direction. We'll make some projects viable that aren't currently viable, but let me give you some startling numbers. In the month of January, 62 condo units were sold in the city of Toronto. All of last year, 2,091 were. In a healthy market, approximately 16,000 units would be being sold. So although this is a step in the right direction, we really believe that all three levels of government, municipal, provincial, and federal, need to come together to do more to stimulate construction, to stimulate new housing, to stimulate economic activity for an industry that really is in dire straits.
Now, this report says the slowdown in housing could lead to a generational negative impact when it comes to supply here in the city. Can you give us a better understanding of how much housing needs to be built to keep up with the changing demographics?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that sentiment and that thought, that if we don't do something to stimulate demand by 2027, in 2028, we are really going to see a tremendous shortage of housing across the GTA. So beyond just the city of Toronto, we estimate that 50,000 units need to be built on an annual basis to meet the demands of the people that want to call the Greater Toronto Area home. Within the city of Toronto, we know there's probably 18,000 units that are ready to be built that can't make the math work because the cost to build is too high. So we certainly agree with that thought that is in this report. We believe a comprehensive solution looking at removing HST on new homes. That was a tax that was put in place in 1991 and hasn't been adjusted since then. Reducing development charges, not only delaying the payment of them, but by reducing them, like cities of Vaughan and Mississauga have, and looking at how we can make sure that this industry, which offers an opportunity right now in this time of economic uncertainty, that jobs that in the housing industry can't be exported to other countries. So by investing in the housing industry now, not only will it ensure that we have houses for people that want to call the area home, but it will create economic activity in times of uncertainty.
Very interesting. Well, thanks so much for your time today and providing us with those interesting numbers and analysis. Thanks so much, David.
It's always a pleasure, anytime.
And Lena and Bakari, this report will go to the mayor's executive committee next week. And if it is approved by council, we'll get more on the implementation process coming sometime in the second quarter of this year. Back to you.
All right, Sija Liu reporting live. Thanks for this, Sija. And thanks for that conversation. You're watching Live at 5 on Toronto's Breaking News, CP24.
The Maple Leafs are going to be looking to make it 2 wins in a row when they take on the Panthers. We're going to tee up tonight's game tonight.
One here for a win.
Canada only works as a state. It doesn't. We don't need anything they have.
Donald Trump continues his rhetoric when it comes to Canada, saying that he will not bend on tariffs. And his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, accuses Canada of being not respectful and not thankful as the Premier and others meet with senior U.S. officials for a high-stakes meeting in Washington.
And these are pictures of the Premier, Doug Ford, ahead of today's meeting, heading into that meeting. Were today's talks constructive? Will they lead to any change? We're waiting to find out.
And we're back at the scene of a deadly fire in Oshawa. It's rocked a local community. What we're hearing from investigators today, that's coming up.
You're watching Live at 5. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lena Latifact.
I'm Bakari Savage. We're watching developments in Washington tonight. That's where a high-profile meeting is taking place between federal and provincial officials and U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick.
CP24's Arda Zakarian joins us live from Queen's Park with the very latest. Arda, Howard Lutnick struck a much more adversarial tone as he headed into that meeting. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, so he started off a few days ago calling Premier Ford, reaching out that olive branch to him, Ford accepting it. It all seemed like it was going really well. And Premier Ford said cooler heads need to prevail because everything was becoming really heated. And then Howard Lutnick today took on a more aggressive tone. He said Canada needs to be respectful and very thankful. But let's talk about who is at this meeting today. It's going to come to a close sometime very soon. We're expecting to hear from Federal Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc, who is actually at that meeting right now, as well as there's the Federal Minister of Industry, Philippe-François Champagne, and Canada's ambassador to the United States, as well as Premier Ford, and of course, Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, who called this meeting in the first place. Now, no matter what happens today, certainly industries in both the United States and Canada are feeling it.
We want a constructive meeting. I just have to remind the American people, the President and Secretary Lutnick, we're your largest customer. There's no one that buys more products off the United States than we do. And guess what? Inflation's going to happen. A tariff on Canada is a tax on the American people.
And here's more from Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick when he appeared on Fox News just before this meeting.
the starting point is we care about America first. We care about American workers first. And we want to bring back those jobs to America. So we're going to bring back more and more jobs to America. We don't want to buy 60% of our aluminum from Canada. We want to bring it to America. We want the cars to America. We want to make America great first. Then we can worry about Canada.
And it's hard to know exactly what happens behind closed doors, what's happening at that meeting right now. Hopefully we'll find out soon. But of course, there are lots of egos here, a lot of big players, and Premier Ford just needs to remain calm and cool, as he said, so the negotiations continue and he can get Canada a good deal. Back to you.
Okay, live from Queen's Park, CP24's Arda Zakarian. Arda, thank you. Well, earlier today, U.S. President Trump continued his 51st state rhetoric when talking about Canada. This happened during a meeting at the Oval Office today.
Canada only works as a state. It doesn't. We don't need anything they have. As a state, it would be one of the great states anyway. This would be the most incredible country visually. If you look at a map, they drew an artificial line right through it between Canada and the U.S. Just a straight artificial line. Somebody did it a long time ago, many, many decades ago, and makes no sense. It's so perfect. As a great and cherished state, keeping "O Canada," the national anthem. I love it. I think it's great. Keep it. But
now, the trade war was on the table when Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly sat down with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio at a G7 meeting in Quebec today. CTV's Jeremy Charon has more on that.
Certainly, tariff talk and the trade war has been front and center here at this G7 foreign ministers meeting in Charlevoix, Quebec. Of course, there is a public and a planned agenda here where talks are expected on various different topics. But certainly, we have seen much of the focus here on, tariffs and the ongoing trade war between Canada and the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly had a bilateral meeting this morning where I'm told the focus was Canada-U.S. relations and tariffs. Marco Rubio, of course, made comments yesterday coming into this G7 meeting that it would not be about taking over Canada. He was not coming here to talk about Canada becoming the 51st state. He has been hard-pressed to avoid questions about it, certainly from the Canadian contingent of reporters that have been trying to get questions to the Secretary of State about repeated threats from President Donald Trump, about annexing Canada. We have not received answers to any of those questions yet. We expect to be able to question Mr. Rubio tomorrow. Perhaps the first opportunity we'll get to actually get an answer to some of those questions. But he made it clear coming in that would not be the focus of his discussions. The focus here, in terms of the agenda at the G7, is on safety and security in regions around the world. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, in her opening remarks today, talked a little more about what they're focusing on here.
I look forward to discussing how we can continue to support Ukraine in the face of Russia's illegal aggression, and we will want to see just and lasting peace in Ukraine. Of course, we want to foster long-term stability as well in the Middle East in the interest of all the people in the region.
Now, again, while that is the public agenda, that is what is happening at times behind closed doors, we have seen a lot of talk about tariffs, about the ongoing trade war, and not only from Canada and from the U.S. We've seen other countries show support in ways for Canada and what is going on. The foreign minister from Germany, along with the European Union's vice president, who is in charge of Foreign Affairs, today wore white and red, posted a social media post supporting Melanie Joly, offering their support for Canada, saying that they stand with Canada. And so a clear show of support there from some of the G7 allies when it comes to Canada and the ongoing tension between our country and the United States. Italy's foreign minister was asked as well today about repeated comments by U.S. President Donald Trump about annexing Canada. His comment was that Canada will be Canada even in the future. So certainly, even among leaders from other countries, there is a lot of talk here about threats that have been repeated by the U.S. administration towards our country and the ongoing trade war and the tension. Jeremy Charles, CTV News, Charlevoix, Quebec.
And keep it here on CP24. We are awaiting a live update from Canadian officials on how talks with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick went. We'll take you live to Washington as soon as that press conference begins.
Another news, one person's dead after a crash northeast of Uxbridge.
Chopper 24 was over the scene on Lake Ridge Road at Scugog Line 14. The footage suggests a dark sedan and white SUV collided head-on with both vehicles off in the ditch with significant front-end damage. Durham police say a female victim died in this crash. The roads are expected to be closed for a number of hours.
Let's go now to Oshawa. This is where officials are still trying to determine what caused a fatal house fire.
A mother and her 9-year-old daughter did not survive, and heavy equipment is now on the scene. CP24's Steve Ryan joins us with a live update. What are investigators saying today, Steve?
Well, Lena, investigators tell me that they are coming back tomorrow. The Ontario Fire Marshal's office will conduct their investigation at the house tomorrow. Once the house is taken down bit by bit, they're concerned about the structural integrity of the home or what's left of it. So they have brought in, as you mentioned, the heavy equipment to help with that investigation. I would describe the mood here today in this Oshawa neighborhood as somber. This house on McGregor Street that was burned basically to the ground, I would say. The shell is still standing, but if you see inside of we're going to show you inside of the window, the house has collapsed within itself. And that is what's causing the concern for the OFM when it comes to going anywhere near the inside of the house to start their investigation. This is why you've got the heavy equipment on the scene here, and they will start their investigation and take the house down tomorrow morning, I am told. So I also have been told by police that the father and the 12-year-old are still in critical condition in hospital. And this is why the police are here holding the scene as well, because this entire location is still an active scene with regards to the fire investigation being done by the Ontario Fire Marshal's office, and they, of course, will determine the cause, origin, and circumstances surrounding the fire. And we did get neighbor reaction earlier on as well, and here's some of what we were told. Let's listen.
It's very sad and heartbreaking. What upset me the most was it's March break, so those kids should be out having fun. And maybe they might be alive if they were in school. Like if it was a regular school day, they might have been up getting ready for school, or they would have already have left for school. So it's just very disheartening.
I spoke with a woman who was walking her dog about an hour ago, and she just looked at that house and said she was speechless as to what she saw, and then the tears came down her face as well. So that pretty much describes what people are feeling here today in this neighborhood. Send it back to the desk.
Okay, CP24's Steve Ryan live in Oshawa. Thank you. A man and 3 boys are facing a combined 69 charges in a string of armed robberies across Toronto.
Police sharing video of a takedown near Bathurst and Wilston yesterday. Police say 4 people inside the vehicle were taken into custody, and a loaded handgun and hammer were recovered. The suspects, a 30-year-old man and 3 teenage boys from Brampton, allegedly committed 3 armed robberies at electronics stores since March 1st in Etobicoke, North York, and Scarborough.
It's 5:41, 6 degrees. This is Live at 5.
All eyes on Washington tonight. This is where Canadian officials, including the Premier, are meeting with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and other senior officials. This is an effort to tackle the ongoing trade war. Stay with us as we watch for live updates. We'll be right back. All right, we're going to take you to Washington now, where we understand Doug Ford is standing by, waiting to speak with reporters. Let's see if we can get that live shot for you. There he is now, the Premier, speaking with reporters after a high-stakes meeting with Secretary Lutnick. Let's listen in.
And we've also agreed that we're going to have another meeting next week, and I think it's going to be very productive as well. We want the best outcome for both countries. We're like a family, and sometimes there's tension between families, but that was an extremely productive meeting, and I just want to thank the Secretary for the opportunity to go in there and stay this long and communicate. We shared a tremendous amount of views back and forth, and I'm feeling very positive, and I just look forward to reaching out again next week. But this, I can honestly say, was the best meeting I've ever had coming down here.
Why do you say that? Why?
Well, because I feel and I keep saying we feel like the temperature's come down. I'm not commenting on their behalf. We also know we're an extremely important trading partner, I'd say top tier in the world to the United States, and how we can continue working together to support each other. And I know it's still going to be moving forward, and we'll get there, but there's always be bumps in the road. But it was very, very productive.
Everything is still on, right?
I'm sorry?
Nothing has been stopped. There's still
No, but it was very, it was, I don't call them the threats. We were having very productive conversations, and they turned out very, very well. And I just look forward to, again, continue communicating. Next week, we got a lot on the table back and forth, but it was very, very good. It was very civil. Very going back and forth, so I just appreciate the opportunity, and I'm grateful that we're able to do this rather than going back and forth on tit for tat.
Premier, how do you take Commerce Secretary Lutnick at his word when he says something very different to his American audience when he appears on Fox News? Once again, he mocked Canada, he mocked you, he said that Donald Trump taught you a lesson, and that's why you backed down. How do you deal with that type of tone when it's coming from the U.S.?
Well, I can't comment on Secretary Lutnick, what he says. All I know, first time we had an opportunity to sit right across from the table from him, look him square in the eyes, and had a great conversation. It was very positive. That's what I can tell you. It was very, very positive on both sides of the table there.
Is the energy surcharge going back on? With this meeting today, what were you hoping to achieve?
You know, my years in business and years in government, I believe in building relationships. And I think we've come a long way in building this relationship. It's the first opportunity. I've talked to Secretary Lutnick before. Now, keep in mind, Secretary Lutnick is a brilliant business mind, a shrewd negotiator, and he's doing what's right for his country, and I'm doing what's right for my province, and in turn our country. But let's continue on this conversation. But I'm leaving this meeting extremely positive. That's what I'm leaving. I have to go.
Listening to a very hopeful Doug Ford after he wrapped up a high-stakes trade war meeting with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Doug Ford called the meeting very civil, extremely productive. He talked about protecting Ontario and Canada and said that he's back in Washington next week to meet with U.S. officials again, and says this is the best meeting he's had in Washington so far.
Yeah, along those lines, he said he had a great conversation. You know, CTV's Judy Tran is there, and she asked Premier Ford about the disparaging language used by Lutnick earlier. Ford said that he can't comment on that, really, only that they had a great conversation. It was very positive. He says that we will get there, and, reiterating that, quote, I can honestly say this was the best meeting I've ever had.
Some interesting developments from Washington. We're going to take a quick break now. You're watching Live at 5. Our coverage continues right after this. Stay with us.
A new warning today about a sharp uptick in measles cases in Ontario.
Cases have more than doubled in the past 2 weeks. That is according to Public Health Ontario, and CP24's Lindsay Biscaya joins us live with the latest details. Officials are concerned about the under-vaccinated and the unvaccinated, Lindsay.
Yeah, because most say that is the reason that we're seeing measles basically coming back in North America, because really since 1998, it was eradicated in Canada, eradicated for the most part from North America by the early 2000s. So seeing this uptick again, incredibly concerning and frustrating for a lot of health officials. Public Health Ontario reporting 372 total cases since the outbreak began in October. That's 195 cases, also a jump since the agency's last report back on February 27th. So that's less than a month ago at this point. And the agency also saying, as Lena mentioned, they're seeing a large decline in vaccinations ever since the pandemic. Of the 31 people that were hospitalized for measles, apparently 30 were unvaccinated, and the other case, the immunization status is not known. So when it comes to that drop in vaccinations, health officials are saying that it's incredibly frustrating. It's partially because of COVID-19, the pandemic, vaccinations were not as easily available, but it's also because of vaccine hesitancy. Here's more from Dr. Fahad Razak.
Remember, the vast majority of people impacted by this outbreak right now are kids, right? And kids are very, very susceptible to this illness. And of course, whether a child is vaccinated or not has to do with parental decisions. It's not even really under their own decision making. So you're having a disease completely preventable, essentially through vaccination, spread rapidly among kids who have very little say about whether they are protected or not. So to me, as a physician who sees patients, sees how much of illness is not preventable, when you have a scenario like this of disease spreading at this rate, it's very, very sad.
Incredibly concerning, incredibly frustrating. Important to note, Dr. Razak also said, Lina and Bakari, there is still hope to maintain that eradicated virus if people just get vaccinated. Back to you.
Okay, CP24's Lindsay Biscaya, live in the newsroom. Thanks, Lindsay. It's 5:53, 6 degrees. This is Live at 5.
More news straight ahead. Stay with us.
There should be quite a display in the sky tonight after midnight.
This is what the moon looked like early this morning over the Toronto skyline. Beautiful. Early tomorrow, you'll have a chance to see a total lunar eclipse and a rare blood moon. For more on this, we're joined by Dave Kirsch, an instructor in the Department of Physics at Toronto Metropolitan University. This sounds pretty cool, a lunar eclipse and a rare blood moon. What are you watching for, Dave?
Yeah, well, it's going to be a beautiful view for those who are awake to see it. It starts around midnight as the moon starts moving into the Earth's shadow, but there won't be much visible until, let's say, past 1 a.m. And then the real blood moon, the actual total lunar eclipse, is between 2:30 and 3:30. So for people who are up, it'll be quite impressive. The moon will be fully in the Earth's shadow. The only light striking it will be a little bit of red light peeking around the edge of the Earth. So the result is that the moon will be mostly dark, but will look red, which is quite dramatic to see.
Hey, Dave, let's talk about the rarity of this.
Yeah. So the last time it happened that it was visible was from here, was around, I think, 3 years ago, something like that. They're not super rare. They do happen every year or 2 or 3. The next one is a year from now on March 3rd. I think that one's happening at 6 a.m., so not quite as an egregious a time. But a lot of people, since they do often happen kind of at awkward times, a lot of people never really see one, even though they do happen every year or so. So this is an opportunity that hopefully a lot of people will take advantage of.
Okay, do you need any eye gear to watch? And can you talk to us about the best vantage points?
Yeah, so the beauty of a lunar eclipse is the ease. Unlike a solar eclipse, there's a big one that happened last year that a lot of people probably worked to try and view, but this is no work at all. You require no eye protection, no nothing. This is not looking at the sun and endangering your eyes. This is looking at the moon. So anytime you could see the moon, then you're fine. So the best place to view this, well, it's happening at 3 a.m. The best place to do it is from your bedroom through a window. As long as you can see to the southwest, which is where the moon will be, you really don't need anything. Even a telescope and oculars that we sometimes talk about, this would be actually a bad time to use those because the moon will be dark. So really, the naked eye, just looking to the southwest, is all you need.
All right, Dave Kirsch, instructor in the Department of Physics at Toronto Metropolitan University. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for this. It is now 5:58, 6 degrees. You're watching Toronto's Breaking News, CP24, and we're following developments from Washington tonight. This is where Doug Ford, François-Philippe Champagne, and Dominic LeBlanc just wrapped up a meeting with Howard Lutnick. Doug Ford calling it a positive and productive meeting. We'll tell you more coming up at 7.
Thank you for watching. CTV News at 6 is next.